How much intervention can a company do? Just an idea and a real life scenario, by the way, which we're going to talk about today. And of course, not only about the scenario, but also about how to do it better. An employee posts on a social media platform that he or she, doesn't matter which kind of gender identity or gender they have. So that person was insulted by a security staff member in a shopping mall. And he was wildly insulted, said something like, "Oh, you shitty German, shitty Brit." So it was a quite nationalist utterance. And the posting says, that is racism against people who live here. A foreigner just insulted me. And of course, someone commented under that post and says, "How do you know that it's a foreigner?" And then the person who wrote that post said, "I am neither deaf nor blind. I can spot foreigners." So here we go. So we obviously spot foreigners in this case by skin color and the accent they have. And here we are claiming that there was a racist utterance against him. By the way, it is, of course, there is no debate about that. It is unacceptable when security staff in a shopping mall insults someone else. That is unacceptable, no question about that. But making a racist statement about it because you didn't understand what racism is isn't really great. Or better to say, it is completely unacceptable. So what happens is that suddenly a client sees that post, and because they work in the events industry, they now approach your company and say, "Look, we have a diversity project together, and I'm not sure if I want to hire your events company when you have racists in your staff. So what do we do here?" That is just example number one. Example number two, company openly says, "Oh, we have empowerment and you can do whatever you want and you have all the areas of expertise, then you of course can decide on your own." And in reality, the opposite is the case. Every single step gets controlled in sales, down to every single record set in the CRM system. Everything is discussed every Friday. In project management, they have weekly meetings where every single step gets controlled, and every team leader then has a manager who controls them. Every manager has a senior manager. So up the hierarchical pyramid, controls get worse, not better. That's just example number two. By the way, all these examples are real world examples. And example number three, you may have heard about it because it was on main news in Germany. There will be a quota, and they now plan to have a women's quota on C-level. So the board of directors, there must be a minimum number of female people on the board. And of course, immediately, free enterprise kicked off. How do you dare to put a quota on us? So first we have to analyze what is behind that. Of course you can say, so and with example number one, the shopping mall example, of course you could say, well, what they do on their social media is private. You could do that. Don't you have all these value statements on your website of your organization where you talk about diversity and respect and human rights are not up for negotiation, etc., etc.? So what about these statements? Oh, they don't apply on private social media? Well, I think when an employee 5 minutes past 5 goes home and says, "I had another bad day in office of organization XYZ, and the CEO, let's say Mr. Smith, is an idiot." I think when someone posts something like that, which is an insult, not even racist, then immediately you would implement countermeasures because you would say that is a bad example, gives a bad reputation to the organization. Also, it could encourage to do the same. So why is the insult against the CEO so much worse than a racist statement publicly made by an employee? So you see, you on the one hand say you have values, on the other hand, you seem to be morally flexible depending on which person gets attacked. So when you talk about, this is just example number one. Example number two, when you have empowerment and you control absolutely everything, and what you did is you told people, oh, you can do whatever you want because you know that people like to hear that. You want to be one of these cool and hip companies having empowerment and people can do what they want and they can act within their means and they have all the freedom and quick decisions and flat hierarchies, while realistically, you're not. What you did was you obviously had bad consultancy, or simply it was your own bad idea to portray yourself as a cool company, which you're not. And aspect number three, the example number three about the women's quota on C-level, well, let's face it, the idea behind it is since the 1960s, since 1968 to be precise, we speak about equal rights. For 50 years now, we talk about it. Since the end of the 90s, diversity became a hot topic in free enterprise. And many companies do very well with diversity. Unfortunately, even way more companies do not. So when we look into free enterprise, and we still see that about 95% of all C-level positions, 95% of all board-level positions, even when it's 90%, we don't have to debate if it's 90 or 95 or 85. When the vast majority of board positions are given away by network and not by skills, while at the same time you often as leaders say it's only about the skills, you can be whatever you want in this organization when you contribute values, people see when everything is based more on insider deals rather than proper skills. So what can you do better? So step number one, when someone of your staff makes a racist statement, you need to act on it immediately. And quite frankly, the minimum is that you take them. So first, they need to get a warning, they need to be taken off the project, and most likely they will have to leave your organization. Because whatever you do with that person sets an example to what's up next. When you say racism is just a verbal warning, anyone else afterwards can make a racist statement and get away with a verbal warning. So by the way, when then someone just insults your CEO without any racism in there, that's not even a verbal warning. You can just accept that and get over it, as you say. Oh, by the way, some people might now claim, oh, this whole board level thing and racism, it's all just people being offended. And we get to that in a minute because it's not. So aspect number two, when you have empowerment in place and you know that you don't have empowerment in place, but the opposite, which is micromanagement, where you control absolutely everything. When you are an organization and you openly say, we are very traditional, we have a certain formal structure, we want to change, but it will take some time. Will you help us to do so? People will appreciate that. People are not angry about hearing the truth unless you don't tell the truth, but pretend that you tell them the truth and then they find out that you lied to them. So as soon as you know your organization isn't the most modern one, just be sure that whatever you do meets the minimum criteria of telling people the truth. And aspect number three, the women's quota we have, let's face it, it is simply a reaction after for 50 years nothing happened. As I just said, since the 1960s we talk about equal and women's rights. Since the 1990s, diversity is a hot topic. And even when we only say since the year 2000, it's another 20 years and nothing has happened. The last possible action of a government is when free enterprise always promises, but nothing happens. Well, quite frankly, you can't complain to get a quota after that. And I can quote one of my most valued colleagues here, Ilya Greshkovich, because we basically have the word-by-word same statement towards that. Both of us are completely against quotas. But if there is no other way to implement diversity, the quota is the way to go, because you already have shown in the past that you deliberately ignored diversity. You deliberately ignored diversity. So don't complain afterwards. And by the way, when now someone says it is only about contribution, it is only about qualification, it's only about education, you should look into communication theories from Václavic and the 4 levels of communication from Friedemann Schulz von Thun, because you are responsible and accountable for the message you send with these statements. When you have 5% female leaders in your organization and you say it is only about value contribution and education and getting the right things done, what you basically say is women are too stupid to make it in this organization. And that is a statement where you will get attacked for, and you quite frankly deserve to do so. And immediately now someone will say, oh, this is just the young generation being offended, and then they start with slurs like snowflakes, etc. And of course, immediately someone will say, it is just you criticizing old white men because you don't like old white men. No, that's not it. And I just give you 2 additional examples which we have to talk about today. Aspect number 1 is John Cleese. Many of you will know John Cleese from Monty Python. John Cleese made history for great comedy, and I loved his movies. Just when I see what his recent statements are, I am, quite frankly, way less impressed. So John Cleese, for example, was not only supporting Brexit, and when he received a bit of backlash for it, he said, no, I don't have strong views on Brexit, I just want to have the EU reform. So he tried to get away with that. Then he said London isn't really an English city anymore, that is one way to say you don't like globalization. And quite frankly, you also don't like diversity and immigration, which already is a completely unacceptable statement. And during a gender debate, he says he would like to be a Cambodian policewoman. And then he asks, is that unrealistic? And as long as, and I mean, I really could attack John Cleese for, he moved to St. Kitts and Nevis, 10% tax rate and no income tax on any kind of royalties and foreign income. And I'm not going to attack him for that because he moved to a place where he actually lives. As long as you move to a place and really live there, perfectly fine that you pay the tax rate from there, as long as you really live there. Getting back to the main topic, when there's a gender discussion and the only thing you have is a stupid slur to offer, what kind of respect do you expect when you treat issues like that? And by the way, John Cleese left the UK because he said the country is in a mess. Well, who brought the country into that mess? Oh, old white cisgender men. And who made the inappropriate statements about gender and diversity? Old, white, straight, cisgender men. It's not that people have anything against old, white, straight, cisgender men, but when this group over and over again, which is the group in power still on a global basis, if you, as a representative of this group, make one unacceptable remark after another, you should not be surprised that you receive severe criticism. And when you now think, oh, there is no disadvantages, again, it's all about education and put the work in, and when you put the work in and you work hard, you will make your way up. I just can give you another example. Ugo Sahin. You might not have heard of Ugo Sahin, but you will know him in a minute. Ugo Sahin. In Germany, back in the days, we had a 3-level school system. Gymnasium was the highest one, Realschule was the second one, Hauptschule, the lowest one. That's where they wanted to put him after elementary school. They said Ugo Sahin has to go to the Hauptschule, which is the lowest school qualification. After 9 years, you have to leave and then find a job. So compared to Realschule, which is 10 years, and Gymnasium, which is 13 years, plus the opportunity to go to university. So they wanted to put him into the lowest qualified school with the least amount of chances in society and later working life. So Ugo Sahin should go to the German Hauptschule. Only because his German neighbor put an intervention in, they sent him from the lowest level of schools to the highest level of schools, the gymnasium. And you will still wonder, who is Ugo Sahin? Never heard of him. No idea who that bloke is. Did that guy just do something? Is he like a sports player? Did he invent anything which is relevant to us? Because Niels, that's me, Niels, you are now talking about racism and disadvantages in society and how bad leadership is the root cause of all this. And could you please give proof? And yes, I can. You don't know Ugo Sahin. Today, Ugo Sahin, who, just to remind you, was meant to go to the lowest qualification school possible, and then by the intervention of his German neighbor, was able to go to the highest qualified school. Ugo Sahin today is Professor Dr. Ugo Sahin, the man who invented the COVID-19 vaccine we are all looking for, and we were all looking for month and month to come. I hope I gave you an idea of how important not only diversity but good leadership is. And there is no shame to be late to a party. There is no shame to say we have to work on that. Let's just get into a discussion. It's never too late to learn, but there is a shame in just ignoring facts, evidence, and proof. And I hope you will join me on the learning side to make things better. And for now, I wish you a great week. For today, thank you very much for your time.